Yo guys, good evening. Tonight we are going to be doing the commentary slash story time for Time in a Bottle. This is a project that I've been wanting to do for quite some time now, and I just never really have had. I start it, but I never really finish it. And so it's just been kind of on the back burner for like a really long time now. And I've been wanting to do it, wanting to do it, and wanting to do it, and I decided that I was going to wrap it up. I don't have any games currently on the docket that I can go and work on and finish and stuff due to life circumstances and everything else. So I was about 60% done with this project. And so I finally decided to finish it. So before this video gets up off the ground, there's going to be a lot of changes coming to the channel. There will be another video potentially that comes after this one explaining basically what I'm doing on YouTube because I'm running into a lot of issues left and right. So it's impacting basically the content that I create as a creator and stuff. So we're going to be going ahead and doing that video at some point. But for now, what this is story time for each photo. We're going to be going through each photo one by one, and we're just going to go and tell the story behind it and stuff. A lot of people have been asking me about the animals that I've had or have currently, and so I thought it'd be something nice to do. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this. So for this photo, this is my dad's cat, and she is just the silliest thing ever. She is a tuxedo cat, and we actually found her outside. She was an abandoned stray and stuff, and when we had found her, she was actually really thin. She didn't really have like a lot of meat on her bones or anything like that. You know, she was a really just a disgustingly thin animal. So the idea was we were going to go feed her, fatten her up, and then we were going to take her in to go and, you know, give her away to another family and stuff. And it just never happened. What ended up happening was she became my dad's best friend. And so my dad doesn't have a lot of animals. He typically has had just this cat right here. And he's had like a handful of dogs, but for the most part, he's just had a cat. You know, he's only had one cat that he's ever really enjoyed. So her name is Precious and stuff. And as you can see here, she's just kind of laying on the couch. Now, that look on her face mainly stems from her seeing the fly swatter. She had this weird little thing that she would like to do, where if my dad had the fly swatter, she would like being smacked by it. I have no idea why. I'm not sure what caused it. I just know that she enjoyed doing it and stuff. And it was just one of the most bizarre things. So she had started to fatten up a fair bit after we had gotten her fixed and stuff, and so she put on all this weight. So as she got older, she became like a really fat tuxedo cat, and it was just really really sweet. We had her since I was a child, more or less. Found her in the middle of winter, and by the time she had passed away, we had lost her about three-quarters of the way through this year. She was like 28, 29. Like, we literally had her, you know, since I was like a little kid, and she just kind of kept going for the longest time. So for this photo, she's just kind of laying on the couch staring at the lens. She had another oddity that she would typically do where if my dad had a spray bottle, so we had a spray bottle for the cats, right? And it was mainly to keep them off the counters and things like that, you know. This cat would try to drink out of the spray bottle a fair bit. She would literally sit there, and if my dad had the spray bottle, basically he would go point it at her mouth, squirt her mouth, and she would go nom 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 nom, and then wait for more to happen, and she would just continuously do this. Like, she had a functioning water bowl. You know, she had like a real nice water bowl with filtration and stuff built into it, but she just really liked being hosed in the mouth with a water bottle. And I just thought it was the cutest thing for like the longest time. So this photo here, she's basically I had just gotten my LG G2. It was one of my first smartphones that I had ever had. And so I was going around and I was like taking pictures of it and stuff, and I wasn't really thinking about it too much, and I noticed that basically my dad had the water bottle out, and this cat had snapped to attention, so she was literally sitting there. The look on her face is just priceless. She's just literally laying there waiting to be hosed. Like, she didn't care, like she would just get sprayed with a water bottle all the time. Cat just had no fucks to give. Sometimes if my dad would go to spray her with a water bottle, she would go and she would like wave her little arms around trying to get the water as it traveled through the air, and I just thought it was funny. So this is my dog Bug. I've had other dogs growing up and stuff, but I didn't really start taking photos until much later in life. So I had Bug. I got her when she was a couple years old. I had her for a very long time. I lost her about 2 years ago. This is when she was about three, and she lived to be really old, creeping up into her 20s and stuff. And so she had this habit of, well, it wasn't even so much a habit she had. We both had this habit. I would walk in and I would be like, it's belly time. And she would just kind of flop onto the ground, roll over, and she would get her gut scratches for the day. Well, Bug used to be a rather thin dog. When she had gotten a little bit older, we went ahead and we got her fixed and stuff because we didn't want the medical issues that later on typically coming down the track, like mammary tumors and things like that. So this was about 6 months after she had gotten fixed, and she had ballooned up. Like, she had really thrown on some weight and stuff, and like she was kind of a fat girl. So she had walked up to me and she had laid down, she'd flopped down next to that old beat up coffee table that my parents had and stuff. And she had rolled over and I said, is it belly time? So she was just kind of laying there, wagging her tail all over the place. So I reached down and I started scratching her gut, and she was all excited. And then I typically tap her gut. Well, nobody at that time had told me that she had just gone and decimated the water bowl like an hour before. It was like in the middle of summer, and it gets like in between 112 to 115 here in Arizona. So I was going out scratching her gut, and I went to tap her gut. I didn't know that she had to pee because typically she would go to the door. And so I went to tap her gut, and she pissed like all over the place. She got it on me, she got it on the phone, she got it on the table. It was just like a hell of a fucking thing. And so oh man, I was, for some weird reason, I wasn't even pissed with it. Like, I was just laughing at it so hard. And I was just kind of sitting there doing my thing. And, everybody's like, well, aren't you angry about it? And it's like, no, shit happens, And so she got excited and stuff. She was wagging her tail all over the place. And I had taken her out to pee shortly after. So this photo was taken a really long time ago. I was much younger back then. The American flag on the back wall was my grandfather's, and I used to go and display it proudly and stuff. And as the years went by, I kind of became less of a conservative and more of a hardcore raging leftist a bit. So I wound up going, and after a while, I had repositioned the flag. It's still on display, but it's displayed in a state of distress with the way that everything's going. So I used to have that flag on the wall for like years and years and years. So the issue that I had was Numbnuts here would go and she would try to eat the flag. She actually thought that it was something that she could consume. And this is when I was a lot younger and stuff. And so I would wake up. I suffer from PTSD and CPTSD as well as BPD. And I just don't sleep at night. Like, basically what winds up happening is I have revolving nightmares, and it makes it really difficult to sleep. So an average human being sleeps in between, I want to say 8 to 10 hours, if they're really going at it. And then I have a tendency to sleep 4 or 5, and I wake up in a cold sweat. I would wake up and she would normally be like this. Sometimes she would take those giant paws of hers and she would go and rub my face with them, essentially. And she would always have that look on her face. And I just literally I woke up to that. I woke up to that pretty much every single day. You know, the dog took care of me. She was really amazing in that regard, and I miss her really sorely. You know, and so when I had received her, I called her Ladybug, and Bug for short. And I did it because, as you can see on her chest there, there's like little black specks. And so, you know, it kind of reminded me of a ladybug a little bit. I mean, yeah, it's not red and black, but the dots greatly reminded me of ladybugs to a fair extent. So, you know, she was just called Bug, you know, and she was my baby. So for this photo, it was funny as hell. Bug decided one day that she was going to get out of the house, and she was missing for about 9 hours. Her and her sister both had just taken off out the door. I came home, my door was wide open, and Bug was not in the house. I was pissed, so I went and I looked all over the yard. I spent the entire afternoon looking all over the neighborhood and stuff, asking my neighbors, I'm like, hey, have you seen this 190-pound German Shepherd and Black Lab mix roaming the neighborhood with a 80-pound brown fur ball accompanying her? And nobody had seen anything. You know, we had gone and we had looked and looked and looked and looked and looked, and we just couldn't find anything. I was so livid. Like, I wasn't pissed with her. We had somebody try to break into my house. I was more pissed that she was gone because it was scaring the hell out of me. And when I get afraid, I get pissed shortly afterwards. So it was like 6 o'clock at night, right? And she decided, oh, I'm going to randomly show up in the yard. And keep in mind, I had searched like a 5 mile area just looking for this damn dog all over the place. And so she casually walks up and she's exhausted. So to piss her off, I I took her out to pee shortly afterwards. I was like, where have you been? And she was just way too excited to see me. And so after I had taken her out, she didn't pee, of course, but when we came back in, she had collapsed on my bed. And she was just so damn tired. And so she goes, she collapses, and she just starts snoozing, essentially. And that's when I caught this photo here. I really liked it. It's one of my favorites because she's just such a tired baby. For this photo, I had taken this photo. Oh man, this is right before she started gaining a ton of weight, and I was still using the old bed and stuff. And she had this like little corner spot of the bed that she absolutely adored. So what would happen is I would go have a queen size bed. I would lay on one side, and then she would go and claim the entire other side. You know, I shared the bed with my dog, and so sometimes I would walk in and she would be hoarding up all of my pillows. So underneath all that flubber, there's about 3 pillows there, you know, and sometimes I would walk in and, much like a human being, she would lay on these pillows and she would use them. And I just thought it was the cutest damn thing. You know, like, I would walk in all the time and she would be doing it. If I was out of the house, I could come back, she would be laying on pillows. If I had to step away to do some work, I could come back and she would be laying on some pillows. And it was just kind of a hell of a thing, you know, because she was like the first dog that I had for like a really long time. You know, like my parents had dogs and stuff that they had for a long time, but Bug was the first dog that I had that was just mine. So I didn't really know, like, I knew about the mannerisms of like my parents' dogs and stuff, but when I had gotten my own, I wasn't expecting her to like go and steal all my pillows and hijack half my bed. And I wasn't really ready for any of it per se. But you know, she would do this. She would just sleep on these pillows like a human being, and I always thought it was really funny. She would snore really loudly too. I just thought it was cute as hell. So for this photo, this is right after she had gotten bitten by something. I don't know what bit her, but she was just really miserable. So you can't see it, but on the back of her left hind leg, it's completely naked. You know, something had bitten her and stuff, and her leg had just fucking ballooned up. And she wasn't really doing too well, so we went ahead, we brought her back from the vet, and the only thing she wanted to do was sleep on the bed. Around this time, I had rotated my bed the first time. Um, I was trying to figure out because I was at this point in time, moving into taking care of both my parents because my dad's not a young man anymore, neither is my mom. And so I was rearranging the room to try to make it more spacious and stuff, and just I was trying to do better things with it. So the little fuzzy ass that you see in back of her, that is actually a beagle that my mom used to have called Lily. We found her out in the middle of the desert. We don't really know where the hell she came from. We know that she had a barcode tattoo on the inside of her left ear, and then on the right ear, it had just the labeling of L23. So we had her for a while. She was a beagle that had epilepsy and stuff, and she would have seizures, not really regularly, but if she was like stressed, she would have a seizure, or if there was something that happened that was kind of chaotic, she could have a seizure from that as well. She was kind of like our special needs dog, and she would shake a lot. So she wound up living to be really old. She was like 18, 19 when we went ahead and took her to go cross the Rainbow Bridge because her body just wasn't really doing great. The fuzzy ass that you see on the hard left, that is her sister's butt. Pretty much every dog in the house likes hanging out with me. I just kind of have that, I guess, that attraction. You know, like every animal that I've ever met has just loved the hell out of me for some reason. I had a hard time getting photos of her sister. You know, like her sister would move around so fast and it was just kind of ridiculous. So this is one of the instances where I had literally all the dogs on my bed. And they were just going and hanging out, you know, like Bug had come back from the vet. She was feeling lousy, so her sister would come and take care of her. Her sister had this habit of cleaning Bug's ears. You know, she would come up and she would just clean her ears with her mouth, and Bug would groan because she enjoyed it a little too much. And everybody's just kind of, everybody just kind of got along really well, and I really liked it. So this photo right here is taken a day later, where she still has the bite and stuff, and she was recovering, but with the meds that we had her on, she was still feeling kind of lousy, and she was like really really grumpy and pissy the entire morning, and so she had hijacked my bed again, and it was just one of the funniest things because like she had much better bedding in the den, right? Like she made a choice every single day to go and steal my bed. The bedding that she had over in the den was a lot softer. It was much higher quality. Like I had had this bed for like a long time. It was like old and lumpy and falling apart, and I kept saying to myself, I got to get it replaced, but this dog just loved this bed. She wouldn't really give it up, like my parents had tried for like years to get her to go and sleep in the den, and she just didn't want it. She always had to be in the room with me. So this photo was taken shortly after I had gotten my bed replaced. I had gone, replaced the blankets as well. And if she was in the room with me, it was pretty much a guarantee that she was always up my butt. I had a really bad pneumonia at this point in time, and I was just like in bed sick. I had just come back from the emergency room because my lungs were just doing completely fucking horribly. And she would have this habit of, if somebody like coming back to my room, it's a pretty long hallway, right? There's other rooms and shit attached to the hallway, but my room is literally at the other end of the house. So when somebody walks back to my room, you can hear them coming for like a good, I want to say 15, 20 seconds before they actually show up. So Bug had this habit. If I was in bed or if I was sleeping, she would go and she would put one of her paws on my leg while I slept. And if she heard something, she would get up, much like right here, and she would go and she would examine the hallway. She would always be on point. She was never one of those dogs that would lay on the ground and, things like that, and just kind of like lay there and sleep on the ground. She was always in the bed, always looking around the room, always looking down the hallway. If she heard something, she would often go and investigate it. She was a really intelligent dog like that. And so whenever I was in bed, I could expect to get this treatment, per se. It was pretty damn ridiculous. So with this photo here, um, It's another. We're waiting on the vet essentially. So I didn't know at the time, but Bug had a grain allergy. And so what would happen is she would eat normal dog food, which has a lot of grain in it. Her ears would get really yeasty and she would shake her head. Well, at the time, I had no idea what the hell was going on. The previous vet that I had taken her to said everything is fine. Don't worry about it. So I took her home and she would shake her head and shake her head. So I'd go in, I would clean her ears. I mean, I would really clean them, like really scrub the hell out of those damn things. So what had happened was she had developed an ear infection. And we were waiting to see the vet. While we were waiting to see the vet, because he was about a week away, she shook her head, and then I woke up, and her ear was just fat, just straight up fat. Went ahead, did some research. It turned out that it was a hematoma caused by shaking her head. So basically, that ear, the reason why it's standing up like that is because it's full of blood. And then everybody was like, stick a needle in it and drain it. But I'm so much of a puss that, even though I have the needles and stuff because we administer penicillin shots to livestock and stuff, I just didn't have it in me. I saw that ear and I was like, I don't want to stab her. I love this dog. And, everybody was kind of looking at me like, for fuck's sake, Ram, it's just a needle. And I just didn't have it in me. I mean, I loved my dog and stuff. I couldn't really, I couldn't really do it essentially. And so we wound up taking her to the vet who uh, popped it essentially and then stitched down everything to where she wouldn't develop cauliflower ear because apparently hematomas can lead to that. So while we were waiting, she had like this. She was sleeping on the bed. Her ear was just so warm, and like it had so much heat pumping through it. And so she passed out, and I had taken a photo of her because I thought it was weird that her ear was just standing straight up. And she's starting to get a little bit older in this photo and stuff. She's starting to get that white around her muzzle. Like I had her for years at this point. I was surprised that she was like still going at this point. Because big dogs they don't typically live that long. It's like you're gonna get in between 8 to 12 years. 8 on average and 12 if they're really going the distance. And so I went ahead, I snapped the picture, and then a couple days later, the vet was like, "Hey, go ahead and bring her in." So for this photo, I knew that it was pretty much the beginning of the end, more or less. Um, she was starting to get that confused look on her face, essentially, like a lot of the time and stuff. She was a happy dog. It's just she would look confused all the time. I went and I had taken her to the vet. I had asked what was going on, essentially, and she was like, well, she's getting old. She says he's showing signs of dementia and everything else. So you're only going to have her another year, maybe two. Go ahead and love on her while, you can. And if you have any issues, call me. And so I said, okay. At the time, I was kind of going through like a hellish relationship and stuff. So anytime I cried, she would get nervous. And as you can see, like at the tip of her tail there, it's like moving around. She would only do that if she was really nervous. So the relationship was really bad. And my dog did not like her at all, which is really weird because Bug liked everybody. She was in the entire time that she was alive. Bug only really had a large amount of distaste towards my ex fiance. My ex fiance would go and like try to be cute and stuff, and Bug just wasn't really having it because she saw right through it. I was in the process, when I snapped this photo, I was in the process of thinking about, because I was sitting there talking to her at the time, I was in the process of thinking about going and breaking off the relationship. I knew something was wrong because Bug would growl at her all the time. If we were video chatting, Bug would growl at her all the time. And then my ex fiance would make claims like she was sexually assaulted, things like that. And in turn, this would make me cry because I hate shit like that. And as an end result, Bug would kind of look at me like this, and the tip of her tail would kind of do like a low wag, which is why the tip of her tail is blurred. So I I felt really bad about it because I knew that the relationship was bad and stuff, and I could see that it was impacting me and it was definitely impacting her. She would look at me like this a lot and stuff. And once I had broken off the relationship, she had gone back to normal. And but in the month leading up to it and stuff, like she would always want to see my dog and stuff, and Bug just didn't really like her at all. I found out later that from the police, out of all people, that she is a narcissist, essentially. And so I think that was kind of driving Bug's behavior because the years we were together, Bug would act like this, you know. So I went ahead, I snapped it off, and after the relationship was over, after I'd canned her, Bug had gone back to normal, essentially. I mean, granted, she was still kind of staring off into space, but she wasn't doing that nervous low wag, I guess you would call it, anymore. I wasn't crying all the time. I wasn't stressed all the time. I'm a firm believer that your dog arguably knows what's going on with you better than you do. And so, with Bug, I was just kind of like, oh, hey, here we go. And after the relationship was over, she just kind of went back to normal, went back to being old. So this photo cracks me up. This is actually my favorite photo that I have of this dog. I have a ton of photos of this dog, and it just cracks me up. So we were going, and I was still screwing around with the flags on my wall. I had taken down the Romanian flag and the German flag, and then while they were being washed, I went ahead and I put the American flag in its backwards position. And so when I'd woken up, um, sometimes she would just look at me like this. It's just so silly, I think, because what would happen essentially is as Bug had gotten older, she had gotten what I like to call an old bitch face. So basically, her chin was getting old and bumpy and leathery and had like little hairs poking out of it. Her teeth were starting to get crooked. She had cataracts in both of her eyes. Most of her muzzle was white. Like it was just really, really funny. So if I woke up, sometimes she would be laying next to me like this. And so with her vision degrading and stuff, I would go and I would reach out to go and rub on her, right, to say good morning, essentially. And her eyeballs would just start looking around all over the place. And so I thought it was just like the funniest thing. And I would rub on her, and, she'd wag her tail and be happy to see me and everything else. So this was the face that I would have to wake up to every day. And I always thought it was so silly because, she didn't really age gracefully. I don't think, like, she got old, but she didn't age gracefully. It was all snot and cataracts and crooked teeth and sandpapery chins. And she was just a really sweet animal. I really miss her. She was, a lot of people are like, hey, this is my pet, but with me I was like, this isn't my pet, this is my co-pilot, essentially. That's how I felt about her and stuff. And even her nose kind of like shriveled up after a while. Like the top of her nose would be all cracked and lumpy, and like this dog just aged like milk. And I thought it was funny as hell. And so I'd wake up and I would be like, "Good morning, Grumpy." And so she would go and she would look at me like this, and tongue hanging out, and just it was straight up silly. And I really, really, I miss it. I miss her immensely. So this is my dad's dog, Coco. He had this dog for a while. She was pretty old too. She was almost as old as Bug. Basically, she was a German Shepherd and Pit Bull mix. And as you can see here, she is having the time of her life while napping. So she was really old, all that whites all over her muzzle and stuff. When we had found her, nobody else wanted her. The dog suffered from canine dwarfism and stuff. She had a big head, big body, but incredibly stubby limbs, like just stupidly stubby limbs. She was still a happy dog. She would get up and she would run around and stuff, but I found that as she got older, much like Bug, her hips would start to give her fits. So when they had gotten older, rubbing on them more or less became a full time job. Like with Bug, I would have to rub her lower spine and her hips and stuff because German Shepherds, well, anything lab or Shepherd, their hips have a tendency to go pretty fast. And then with Coco here, she had those German Shepherd genes, and Shepherds are kind of known for hip dysplasia and everything else. So I would have to rub on them all the time. I don't regret it. I would gladly do it again, but what wound up happening is basically they were in pain all the time, and they were incredibly old, and they were well loved, they were well cared for and stuff. They were just amazing dogs, but you couldn't really stop the advancement of time per se. Like it literally stops for no one. So for this photo, basically that is my on the left. That is my dad's dog Kiona. She is a brown labradoodle. On the right is Lily. That was about, I want to say that was about 1 month before she had crossed the Rainbow Bridge. Like she was not doing well. She was shaking all the time and having organ issues, and then we had about 5 months after that we had lost Bug because Bug was sunsetting. So my parents had gone out and gotten labradoodles because as one set of dogs gets ready to leave, they typically bring in a fresh set. I don't really do that. When my dogs pass away, I go through this period where I just kind of grieve. And that's because that dog's my buddy. I've never really believed in going and getting another dog immediately. And then coming back and being like, oh, hey, I'm happy again. I just never really agreed with it. It was a much different thing. So this was a little bit before we lost the two on the right there. So my dad's dog's a straight up menace. She's really playful and she's super goofy and stuff. Her story is my parents had actually gotten her from the breeder and she was the runt. She was bullied by all the other puppies. And then somebody had stepped on her tail as well and had snapped the tip of her tail. So when she walks around, when her tail wags, you can see that permanent bend in the tip of it. So she's got some issues. She's not a bad dog. She just kind of barks. It's like she barks more, I find, than most dogs and stuff. And she's got a little bit of anxiety. And the house is actually relatively chill. It's just she was picked on a lot as a puppy. And so I work with her a fair bit, but she's actually a straight joy to be around. So this photo is right after I had gotten my Pixel 2. I was walking around taking photos because the Pixel 2 was kind of known for taking really good photos. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go around and just going to take photos. Before before I'd learned how to take photos decently, I would just go and be like, okay, we're going to snap a shot. So I would walk around my house and I would get accustomed to how the camera was functioning. So I caught her on the couch here. This was her seventh or eighth day in the home. She decided to just literally go and lay on the couch and just pass out with part of a pillow on her head. Her sister, her older sister, didn't do stuff like that. She would just pass out on the ground and everything else. Nobody really cared. But with her, she always had to be on the couch. She always had to be facing the television. I just thought that it was like some of the funniest stuff, and so she's still a couch sleeper, essentially. Sometimes she'll come in here and hang out with me and stuff and everything else. So this photo, this is her attempting to share the bed with my mom. And I think it's funny as hell because the dogs have their own pillows and stuff, and my parents watch a lot of TV. I don't really watch TV. I don't really enjoy it. Like I just kind of stopped watching TV like 20 years ago and I just never went back to it. But she would go and she would get pissy. As you can tell by the look on her face, she's very grumpy looking. And that is because my mom has changed the channel. God forbid. So she would go, and if she didn't like the channel, she would take her back leg there and she would kick my mom. Like she would thump her with it. Well, my mom doesn't care. She's an older woman. She has no fucks to give. So she would lay on the couch and she would thump my mom, and my mom just like would not give at all. And I thought it was just some of the funniest fucking shit that I'd ever seen because she genuinely gets angry with it. Like if you take it off of Animal Planet, oh holy shit, you know. you can expect to get a lot of bullshit out of this dog, and I just thought that it was really cute because the dog has a lot of personality. With this photo, I was goofing off on my Pixel 2 still at the time. And so we had literally stopped cutting their hair for the winter and stuff because we didn't want them to freeze. And so we would get little cute little photos like this. And so I had posted this photo. Well, I had found it a while back when I was rummaging through old photos I had taken, and I posted it in a couple of servers that I'm in, and I posted it as my mom's dog entering her emo phase, and I always thought it was kind of funny because she has that little side swoop when it comes to like the hair and stuff, and she's just a very excitable dog. She's a very happy dog. Like she has anxiety and stuff, but she's still a very happy animal, and I'm just totally here for it. So sometimes I could wake up and expect to see this. I woke up one night at 3 in the morning and I had a lump. I had a lump that was going and moving its way through my bed. And at the time I didn't have the dogs sleeping on the bed. They typically hang out in the living room and stuff. They're not like Bug, essentially. So I was like, oh my God, there's a lump in my bed. What do I do? So I have a lamp next to my bed. I just rearranged everything in the room. I had pulled the jerk chain on the lamp, and this is basically what I was greeted with. She was all excited and happy to see me, and I'm just sitting there going, dude, what are you doing? Like literally, what are you doing? And so she would be very, very excitable about it and happy to see me. So I'd wake up and I would have all this fuzz and this wiggly nose in my face, and I loved it, just not at 3 a.m. I'm kind of like I'm kind of like one of those people that at 3 a.m. is when things start winding down. Like I start cranking down around 1. I have problems sleeping, so most of the time I'm still up at 3. And so she would just pop into my face, and I'd be greeted with this epic mustache and this wiggly nose. And it was a habit that was kind of hard to break because I would have to explain to her, like, honey, you can't do this. And I would be like, if you want to hang out in here, that's fine. You can't be booping me at 3 a.m., though. It just doesn't work, but, she's a dog. She doesn't care and stuff. And she's just happy to see me. Sometimes she would pop into my room because something would scare her, and same thing, her face and my face, and I would take time out to rub on her, kick the light on and rub on her a little bit, get her calmed down, and then kind of go on from there. So this photo here is what you get when you have a dog that likes to beg. Just for reference, I really don't feed the animals a lot of human food. I don't really believe in it, and this is why. I had just gotten through roasting a chicken, and I was going and I was walking a leg and a wing back to my room with a small plate of veg on the side because I was hungry. I hadn't eaten all day. This dog had wasted no time finding her way to my room to beg for food. This is the I look incredibly cute, I'm going to wag my tail and wiggle all over the place so you can feed me look. And the fucked up thing about it is it works. It's a very effective strategy because I am a sucker like that. And so I would go and I would give her like a little bit of food, but I'll make it a common habit. My parents do it every day. They're older and stuff. They just like spoiling things. And then with me, I'd be like, all right, dude, you're only getting this maybe once or twice a week. And so every single time I go and make chicken, brown ass here decides that she has to show up. And it's really, really cute, and it's very, very endearing. And it's a habit that still continues to this day, and she gets denied chicken still to this day. And I just always thought that it was just really, really funny. So, with this photo, I'm not really sure what happened. I I was walking around with my Pixel 6. I had just gotten it. I was walking around with my Pixel 6 and taking photos, seeing what the camera was like and stuff. And I was learning that it didn't really take very good low light photos. Like it did good night photos and good day photos, but not like good low light dusk style photos. So I had walked out to the living room. It is the middle of the night, and I'm sitting there playing around with the features and stuff. And this dog just has a look of straight dread on her face after I had turned the TV off. Sometimes my parents would leave the TV on for the dogs, but me personally, if they're already like going to sleep and stuff, I just turn it off and walk out of the room. So when I turned the TV off, I heard a sneeze, and then I had turned around and I was greeted with this look. Just this look of complete and utter horror. And I didn't really have anything smart ass to say about it. Really, I was just kind of sitting there looking at her, and I just thought it was kind of silly. And I asked her if she was all right, and she looked at me, then looked at the TV, then looked back at me, then looked back at the TV again, and I snapped a photo of it. And she's just a really silly dog a lot of the time. So eventually, she would become a little too comfortable. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm out of the house a lot of the time. I'm off doing appointments and, I spend a lot of time out of town. So when I was coming back, essentially, I had gone and I'd walked back to my room and I was getting ready to get rid of that old brown blanket because I just had it for so damn long. It was like starting to wear out and everything else. And so I'd walked back to my room and she had passed out on my bed. Like this, mouth open, hair all over the place, curled up on her back. Just the most insane shit that I had ever seen. And I was probably standing there for about a good 5 minutes. She didn't even move. Breathing completely like that, just no fucks to give. Eventually, she had turned her head up to see who had walked into the room because I had said, "Oh, hello there." And when she had gone and like twisted her head up to look at me, that dog was so angry. She was just so pissed because if I walked into my room, it generally meant that her ass was getting off the bed. So this is one of her little sleeper shots, and I thought it was just the silliest damn thing in the world. So this is my mom's dog, Lena. She is a Labradoodle as well. I like to call her the resident rug because she looks like a rug, essentially, and stuff. And we had gotten her, I want to say, a little under a year before her sister and stuff because we were getting ready to lose like all the other dogs and stuff. So my parents were stocking up on animals. And so this dog right here actually came from a woman who was dying from cancer. What had happened was my mom had picked her up as a puppy. What was going on is the woman had a tumor the size of a lemon in her skull, and she wasn't able to care for the dog. And so what had happened was she had just gotten the dog, I think, like 2 months prior, before she had gotten her diagnosis. She was having migraines and stuff. My mom had responded to an ad in the paper, and so what had happened was this giant walking dust mop had come from a breeder. She had papers and everything else. And she came with like shots and a ton of toys, and like this lady was like hardcore invested into this dog. And so went down. My mom, I think, had paid her like $300 for the puppy and stuff. And as we had raised her, my mom would constantly check in with the previous owner, say, "Yeah, she's doing really good," And eventually, we had stopped hearing from her. So we went down and we found out that things had escalated to such a extreme that she couldn't even remember the dog's name anymore. So her name is Lena, and she is kind of a snobby dog, a little bit. She's kind of like Bug in that regard. Like Bug was kind of a snobby dog too, and with her basically she's not very energetic, she's not very excitable, she just hangs out essentially, and that's pretty much it. She hangs out with my mom on the couch all day, and when you let all of her hair grow out, she looks like a dust mop. She's a good dog. She can be very playful and very silly, but she can be a straight up shit at times as well. So, this photo was taken the first time we had had her trimmed. And so we didn't like go down and get her completely shaved. We were like, oh, hey, we're going to go ahead, have a little bit of the hair taken off because the back of her, well, her back, all the hair on her back is very curly and super dense. And, she definitely got more of the poodle in that regard. So what would happen essentially is we would go have a little bit taken off, bring her back. So this was a little bit after her first trim. She had had her legs trimmed up, her butt trimmed up, her back trimmed, and everything else. And she was really extremely pissed at my mom for taking her down to the groomer. So she decided, I had just gotten back from a doctor's appointment. She decided it'd be great to walk into my room, get pissed, and then throw herself on my rug. So yeah, she laid there for about 5 hours, and she didn't want anything to do with my mom, didn't even look out the door. Like, she was just really, really angry, I think. So, this is literally a different photo out of the same shoot. I kind of leaned over my bed a little bit and I asked her, I said, hey, are you okay, Grumpy? And she would just glare at me. Like, grooming this dog was literally the original sin. And so she would just glare at me and everything else and just proceed to lay there and pout. And I just thought it was so funny. So this is, oh man, this is about, almost a year later. All of her hair had grown out and stuff. And like, it's like the middle of the pandemic and everything else. And everything's like shutting down, essentially, trying to keep the pathogen from spreading. And so her hair had just grown all over the place. It was just, oh God, man, it was just so thick and so curly. So she decides to get on my bed and she decides that she wants to take a nap. At the time, I was going and playing a couple of games with my friends and stuff. So I was on the mic at the time. I said, hold on. And everybody was kind of like, what's the matter? And I said, I can't tell where the hair ends and the dog begins. So this is her face. If you look kind of closely, you can see an eyeball. But the thing is the hair on her face is like so thick, right? Just so fucking thick that I literally have to take my hands and push it all the way back just to see her eyes. And then if I go and take my hands off of her, all that fluff goes flying forward. So I was going and looking at her and I said, God, you were just a hairy dog, and she was just sitting there napping. I would just go and take my hand, just gently rub on her and stuff, and she would just pass out. And it's one of the sillier photos. So with this photo, we went ahead and gotten her shaved straight on down to the wood, almost completely naked. And so what was going on is she would go to the groomer and then come home, and even though the groomer gives out treats and everything else and treats the dogs really well, she would come home really pissed. Like she would go and she would pout and have fits and everything else. So when she didn't want to deal with my mom, she would just run to my room. And my room was always pretty much open with me being constantly out of the house and stuff. So I came home one day and I was in the middle of rearranging everything, again, trying to get it to where it needs to be. And like I had ordered a new ceiling lamp and a couple of other things I was working on. I came home and she was sleeping on my bed like this. And she didn't want to move. I tried like picking her up. She's kind of a heavy dog. Like she looks really small, but she's actually really dense. So I would try to pick her up, and it wasn't happening. She would go, she would pout, and then my mom would come and get her, and she would go and she would pout. And then she also hated that pink collar that my mom had on her. My mom's like, I want this dog to look cute. So she went and she got her a pink collar, and the dog just fucking hated it, just straight up hated it. And I just thought that it was one of the silliest things. So with this photo, it's a little bit after she got trimmed and she decided she wanted to continue the tradition of belly time, which was pioneered by Ladybug. So she was raised around Bug. Like there's a lot of influence um, from Bug on this dog. And so what would happen essentially is she would learn that if I asked Bug if it was belly time, Bug would flop over and like do her thing. Well, she started doing it too. Except I don't have to say belly time with her. Like as soon as she sees me coming, she just flops over. Like it's just nothing but gut. And I normally, depending on what I'm doing, I normally have to go and stop and, bend over, scratch her gut a little bit. Then she goes, gets excited, gets up, and then proceeds to go off and do dog things. But yeah, she inherited a lot of Bug's mannerisms. She hangs out with my mom primarily, but she's a one-to-one clone when it comes to mannerisms that Bug had to a certain lesser extent. But yeah, sometimes she would just go and do belly time on my bed and stuff, and I would just come in and groan a little bit because it wasn't belly time like once or twice a day. It was pretty much every time she saw me. And eventually I just got to the point I was like, fine, we're doing this. Reach down, scratch, scratch, then go and leave. And it was just something that was really silly. I mean, it lets me know that the dog is comfy with me. So sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and she would just go and she'd be laying there, much like this. And she would just be staring at me. I always thought it was kind of weird because in many ways, Bug was kind of like my support dog. She never had any formal training. It's just she would pick up on it and she would take care of me. And now that Bug's gone, even though this is technically speaking my mother's dog, she does this. Like she actually does it. So I was going, and at the time, I had been broken up with my ex fiance, I think, for like a year and a half. And I would still get phone calls from her saying that she was going to kill herself if I didn't come back, and life was hard without me, and like all this other crap. And it was escalating to upwards of like in between 20 to 25 calls a day. I was in the middle of swapping out numbers, and so the extreme amounts of stress and anxiety would literally fuck up my sleep more than normal. So sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat and stuff, wondering if my ex had actually killed herself because even though I kind of like went my separate way and stuff, I still wanted like the best for her. Essentially, even though she kind of like went into a tailspin after I left, and she would have psychotic fits quite often. So it was kind of like extra baggage that I had for a while, and it would impact the way that I sleep. So I would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, just kind of wigging out and stuff because it was on my mind a fair bit. And I would have her in bed just kind of staring at me like this. And I would ask her what she's doing. She wouldn't move. Sometimes she would just blink at me. And then other times, like her nose would wiggle around and stuff. And I would go turn on the lamp. And then I would go and I'd rub on her. And she would go, and after I had rubbed on her a fair bit, I'd give her a hug and a kiss, and then she would just lay there and keep staring at me. Go click the lamp off, and then roll over, try to get back to bed. But in many ways, even though it's my mother's animal and stuff, she does a lot of what Bug used to do. Like she still comes in and she checks on me in the middle of the night. If I'm having like a particularly horrid nightmare, she'll wake me up. She's just, she's a good dog. They're all good dogs, technically speaking, but she was actually one of the best ones we've had so far. Bug was great. This one right here is great. We've never had a quote quote bad batch of dogs, but some are definitely better and more memorable than others. It's just a hell of a thing, I think. But there's probably most likely, since I am still technically recovering from a lot of medical shit that's happened, there is going to be a video that follows up after this, and it's going to be me discussing basically how to function on YouTube and stuff because there's like a lot of shit that is making it to where I can't post content. And so we're going to be going and sitting down and talking about this and stuff. And just kind of going from there essentially. But yeah, these are the animals that that I currently have slash had. Um, these are the stories behind it and stuff. For all those that came out, I greatly appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed, your time here, and I'll catch you on the flip side.